All right, where are we? We'll open the meeting up. Everybody ready?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, I'd like to open up the Water Commission meeting Friday, September 16th, 2022 at 9 a.m. Do I have a motion for a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's 3 ayes. All right, so the first topic on the agenda is warrant articles. So we have submitted to the town 3 warrant articles, and 3 warrant articles are, we can get in more detail in a sec, the Beechwood water main, the GAC project, the AT&T lease, and the Verizon lease.
All right. That's 4 articles.
What'd I say?
3.
Okay. Oh, geez. Sorry. For the record, it's 4 articles submitted to the town, which require a vote by the 3 water commissioners. Well, since we have, do we vote on each one separately? Or,
I think so.
well, since Brian and Mike are here, Beechwood water main came in over. Brenda got to help me out with some numbers because I don't have them with me, but we estimated originally $609,000 for the replacement. Did I have that correct?
Hold on, I'm not quite prepared.
Oh, that's all right.
Give me 2 seconds. All right, so. the- Beechwood Street. Originally approved at town meeting 2022, May of 2022, was 700,000. But since then, we've purchased the 12-inch pipe, which was 90,120, leaving us 609,879.
And the awarded bid was for $650. I left this morning. I did not email myself to my cheat sheet for today, so I apologize. I mean, that's all right. I mean, we know it was in around that 650 range.
Trying to think where I have it.
I got it right here. It's
Oh, did you? Thank you.
640,700.
Okay. So the warrant article proposed by the Water Commission would ask for $100,000 from our retained earnings be transferred to our maintenance fund to pay for this project. So at the 640,000, we have contingency, should be contingency built into this project, such as police details, ledge, and everything else that could come up. And obviously whatever's left over will be returned back into retained earnings.
Okay, to give capital budget a backstory on this. I had a meeting after our April 26th meeting with Chris Senior to make sure that they were going out immediately for the RFP for this project, because we have to have this done before the snow flies, as the pipe cannot stand outside. Unfortunately, the first time they bid it out incorrectly, with the contractor supplying the pipe after we had already purchased it. And then by the time they got around to bidding it out again, here we are, you see the date, and this is when it came in. So we're going to be tight on this, and because of weather conditions coming up, we don't know what's going to happen. Do you have any questions?
I had one question. It's Brian Host. What happens, you said the pipe can't stand outside over winter. What happens if they don't get this in the ground prior to the snow flying?
Oh, Jonathan, Fred, this is
The
your
pipe-
expertise.
The pipe can warp and split if it's left outside.
Can it be left inside somewhere?
We don't have any place to house it.
Okay, well, maybe let me rephrase the question. What is the plan if the pipe is not in the ground when the snow flies?
Probably lose $90,000+ if the pipe gets ruined.
Yeah, so we were not expecting this project to start this late in the season. As I said, we approached town manager in April. And
No,
we
I know,
knew
look, I
that it
don't
was
want
going to
to.
be going. Yeah, so we didn't know what was going on, and we just found out this week that they finally got around to getting the bid in, and we're accepting it. So, this is new territory for us right now. We have to see what's happening, when they can
So-
start, and then make contingency plans.
So, Brian, so one of the other options I don't want to see us do is we can pull the extra money from maintenance budget, but however, that's going to shortfall, Jonathan and his crews and Brenda for upkeep to the fiscal year 23. So that's why we're proposing to take the money from our retained earnings, an enterprise fund, and put it into a maintenance to cover any overages that can occur.
Right. So, okay. So let me just back up. So I understand you've got a $60,000 contingency in here fundamentally after you've transferred the 100,000, right?
Correct.
Because, you're at, fundamentally you're at, yeah, well, you've got 60,000 more in there than, just the pipe plus the contract would suggest.
Correct.
So that's your contingency at this point. And, but the real question is, I'm just, it may sound like the answer may be we still need to figure it out, but what if we have an early freeze, early snow, early whatever? How do we? Do we just stand by and watch $100,000 worth of pipe, split, or is there something we can do to defer this out until the spring of next year?
Brenda, when can they start the project?
Well, yesterday, when you guys signed the agreement to accept their proposal, I sent it directly over to Michelle for her to get over to the contractor. It is my hope that next week they can start, at least get here, look at the project. It shouldn't take long to actually get this done.
Okay.
Because, we're in the middle of September. We still have October and November. It's the pipe's only going to go from the end of King Street at Beechwood to Bound Brook. So it's
Okay.
not that long of a stretch. So once they get going, they should be able to go like gangbusters. Unless, of course, they run into ledge. But again, we'll have above ground bypass. So if they can even get the pipe in the ground before they can do, backfilling and all of that, just get it in place.
Okay, do you guys
We-
understand what above ground bypass is?
I do.
Okay, Brian?
Kind of. It's a giant hose, basically, right?
Correct. Pipe
Yeah.
that is above ground to feed all the homes.
Okay. While you're actually putting the system in, do we have any sense as to whether or not the contractor is ready to go, like literally ready to start and be out here this week?
He was actually knocking at the door, not knocking at the door, but he had reached out to Michelle and Brian right after he found out he was the low bidder, saying he was ready to go.
Okay.
I personally have not talked to him. I really don't have any of his contact information yet, but again, I'm hoping to hear from Michelle today
Okay.
and try to coordinate something to start next week. That's my hope.
Okay. Okay. That answers all my questions, and I'll just make a rhetorical statement, right? Which is, we need to be thinking about a plan B in the event that the pipe's not in the ground when the freeze hits. How we got here is less important than how we protect whatever it is, $80,000 or $90,000 worth of an asset.
Worst case scenario,
Yeah.
we have somebody come in and wrap it like a boat. You know, when you winterize your boats and whatnot, I think that
Right.
might be a possibility. It was mentioned to me by somebody in the water industry that could be a game plan.
Brenda, who told you you couldn't sit outside?
Um,
It's C900, right? It's C900.
right, it's
that's
not
fine.
supposed to be exposed to the light, it was my understanding.
Yeah, you gotta,
Yeah,
you can
element.
cover it up. You can cover it up from the UV. It'll turn colors, it'll lighten, but I just checked my pipe supplier. They leave thousands of feet out all winter long with no issues. He says you don't even really have to cover it. It's not gonna be depleted from UV. So I'm not sure where that came from. But I assure you, I just talked to Core and Maine and they have thousands of feet of that all over the place, including the Northeast, and it shouldn't be an issue. That's what, and I just asked the question again a minute ago.
Okay. I mean, if we could just, that resolves my issue. If that's the fact. I mean, I'm indifferent to whether or not it goes in the fall or the spring. I just don't want to lose $100,000 worth of pipe.
No, we're not
Or
gonna,
worse, have the pipe split in the ground after it's been installed because it's been compromised.
that's not how it works.
Okay,
Yeah, we'll cover it though. I would still recommend covering it and just try to keep the animals out of it and so forth.
Okay. Well, look, we just need a
Great.
plan B. That's,
Yeah.
Yep.
you know, don't mean to nitpick what the plan B is. We just need a credible plan B in the event that the freeze hits early this year, or for whatever reason, we just don't get this done, timely.
Correct.
Okay, I think we also need Plan C here, because if we don't get it done timely at the rate of inflation, there may be a problem with the contractor.
You have to go rebid it after, 90 days? Whatever the terms of contract where the bid is good for, you'd have to go rebid it anyways.
Well, let me just probe that for a second. I mean, if we signed the contractor and the contractor doesn't get it done before the freeze, isn't that kind of their problem?
Why,
Or are we on the, or is that a get out of jail free card for them to rebid it and, at a later date at a higher price?
there's gotta be something in their bid docs, them also in our bid docs that says, has to give you a time frame. I
Yeah,
haven't,
But it gives you a time frame to sign them. I mean, once you sign them, isn't it on them to get it done at price?
Well, we need to make
Yeah.
contact. We need to make contact with a contractor. I mean, I think we're spending a lot of time on hypotheticals and what ifs, but
Yeah.
we need to make contact with the contractor. If he can be here within the next couple of weeks, they'll get rolling. And
Then we're
if we
pretty good to
identify
go.
an issue, if we identify an issue, then we can engage a larger group. But water department's been putting pipe in the ground for a lot of years. This isn't new, so I think we can just make contact with the contractor and then cross that bridge.
Okay,
good.
works for me.
So do we want to vote on that, Steve?
yep, like to make a motion to we say approve, make a motion to approve the warrant article for Beechwood, Maine to transfer 100,000 from our retained earnings to our maintenance budget.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Aye. 3 ayes. All right, this is the big one. So,
Actually, Steve, just before we leave this, I know you've already voted this, but what are your retained earnings at this time?
oh,
We don't know. It's over $1 million.
yeah,
Okay. That's sufficient
yeah.
in terms of an answer and in terms of a quantity. Thank you.
All right, so the next warrant article that the water commissioners we wrote up was for the GAC. No, Mike's been involved. So Brian, last January, the water commission 2-1 voted for the Tetra Tech bid of $3.6 million for this project. So as we got through some of the design, the 25 percentile, we had a meeting with the water commission had a meeting with Tetra Tech, and it came up to they revised their estimate to $5.8 million. Their estimated cost for this project. So, so that's a big, so the other bidder in this project, Ty and Bond, was in and around, Lee, if you remember, 5.8 to 6 point something million.
It's 5.8.
They were 5.8, right?
Yes,
Ty and Bond.
yes.
So they were 5.8 million. So, you know, I'm very honest. I admit I was the one that voted for Tetra Tech just because of being price conscious. You know, Ty and Bond had assumed probably inflation and everything else into their bid. So this leaves us with a kind of decent deficit right now. So right now, I wrote the article asking for an additional 3.5 million, which would get us to 7.1 million. Because I think right now we don't actually know what the real cost is, because they even haven't gone out. We haven't even gone to bid yet, which is, I'm assuming, probably won't be until, I'm guessing, anybody coming out like probably December, January of 23, maybe.
Yeah, that's around it.
So essentially, I was throwing extra money because the issue is that you don't want to go back to town meeting for a third time. So again, we don't really know what the true cost is going to be at the end, since they had a big spread in the beginning.
So as of now, we have not received anything, as far as I know, by way of their 75% design estimate. Unless they indicated anything on the last meeting, Lee, we are supposed to hear from them right around now on their probable construction cost at their
Yeah.
75% design point. So we're estimating and we're guessing in terms of what we're requesting.
Correct.
Yeah. And, looking at the information that we have gotten from Tetra Tech, they also did a $75,000 plant study for us that was to determine the need, maintenance, upgrades, and improvements needed to the plant for the next 20 years. And unfortunately, I don't think they really gave us that information, because they never mentioned what's going to be happening with PFAS. And we're looking to put this whole ball of wax of over $6 million into TOC remediation. And we don't know what else is coming up, even though they supposedly did this plant study for us and tell us what we need in the next 20 years.
When you say supposedly, did they hand in anything, or is there nothing you were given?
Oh, they handed in something that told us
But
that
you found it was inadequate?
Yeah, basically. Fred, what did you find in the report? Did you think it showed what we needed to upgrade in the next 20 years to expand possibly our production? Because I know the plant was built quite a long time ago with the plan in mind that it could be expanded to 4 million gallons. I know everyone says it hasn't been able to, but that is what the plant was built with. We are looking at this where we were hoping that we could be informed of what we would need looking down the road. They are supposedly the engineering firm that knows the upcoming technologies. I looked at Amesbury. They had one of these plant studies done where they were able to upgrade their plant over 10 years. And I don't feel as though we got any information from them regarding this. They told us that we needed to upgrade the panel board and we had some rusty bolts and windowsills.
Have
So
the
if
other
I-
commissioners looked at this?
Yeah, so if I could just try to level set the conversation here. So on the agenda for this meeting, we're talking about approving warrant articles, but we also
Right.
have GAC project update. So Steve, perhaps, I mean, if Mike and Brian would like to get into a larger conversation about the GAC project as a whole, which I think would be worth the time. I would like to hear from Jonathan and Fred as well on where we stand and what the best
Right.
course forward is. So I just don't want to confuse the line of conversation here
yes.
between the warrant article and the GAC project. So perhaps, I may suggest that we vote on the 2 warrant articles for the lease extensions and then circle back to the GAC and perhaps wrap that into one conversation.
Good
I
idea.
agree, Chris. So Chris, why don't you take the lead on the AT&T and Verizon? How's that?
Sure. So as we know, AT&T and Verizon Wireless have equipment on the Bear Hill tank, which is under a lease agreement. Both are coming up for a 10-year extension after their first 10-year initial term. In the original lease, both of these require town meeting approval to approve the 10-year extension. So these 2 warrant articles are to seek approval from the town to execute a 10-year extension on both of those leases. Very simple. The agreements largely remain as is. There is a 3% escalator per year for the rent payments, for the lease payments. So nothing changes there. Verizon Wireless is looking to upgrade some of their equipment, and they are asking us to sign a consent letter before town meeting approval to green light their work. So first off, I'd like to make a motion to approve the warrant article for the Verizon Wireless 10-year lease extension.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye. Secondly, I'd like to make a motion to approve the warrant article to approve the 10-year lease extension for AT&T.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So both warrant articles for AT&T and Verizon Wireless were approved.
Yes.
And so if I could just circle back quickly on that consent letter I sent around this morning, I did send it to Brian Joyce to see if he has any comments on what Verizon would like to do. Seems simple enough to me. They have an engineering report. Nothing that they will be replacing or adding is going to add any significant load to the tank or the infrastructure. So is there any discussion on that consent letter proposed by Verizon Wireless to begin their equipment upgrades?
No discussion.
Because I know this has been several months in the making. So I think we should move forward as quickly as we can.
Okay, I agree. So I'll just wait to hear back from Brian if he has any comments on that work they're proposing. And if he doesn't have any comments, I will sign that consent letter for Verizon Wireless and give them the go ahead to begin their work and keep everyone informed.
I
Sounds
agree.
good.
Okay, thank you.
So we're gonna circle back around to the GAC. Okay, so Mike and Brian, just before I jump off and let the discussion happen, Lee and Chris have been alternating on the biweekly basis on these meetings as representatives of the Water Commission. As you know, we can't have 2 because of open meeting laws. So let's kind of review the entire project. I don't know, Fred, if you want to jump in, Jonathan, kind of give them the 10,000 foot level discussion and kind of where we were and where we are now.
Jonathan, you can begin as far as water quality. You're there every day. I know.
I've been around here for almost 4 years. When I first got here, water quality was really, really bad. Took a couple of years, but it's been improving for the last, 2 years or so. We've since, as of this year, put on the aeration system in the pond, which I cautiously feel is helping. TOC this summer was the lowest I've seen it. When I first came on, the first year I was here, we had a really bad rainy season. And then I think we had 2 years that were normal, and then another rainy season. And then this year was really dry. During rain, it gets really, really bad. Like, well, last year with how much rain we received, TOC was very, very concerning. This year, it's, as I said, the best I've seen it. Although, and in the last 2 years, we've been able to also drop the THM numbers. This recent quarter, they went back up to possibly the worst I've seen, but we feel that it's because of the drought, the water ban. There's not enough. There's lowered usage considerably out in the system, so there was a lot of stagnating water that drove those THMs up. And generally speaking, that's my assessment.
And I'll just chime in. It's a very shallow source. The flash is very easy with high rainfall events. Last year, we had a lot of challenges, like Jonathan mentioned. So between the lack of rain, the aeration, chemical optimization, we're seeing better numbers this year, but it's not fixed by any means. Anybody who doesn't know, that total organic compounds is basically the amount of carbon bound in organic matter there, which formulates total trimethanes when chlorine is introduced as a disinfectant, and that's a suspected carcinogen. So we try to sustain or reduce that to the lowest possible number. We take running annual averages per the regulation. You are definitely up against it. This GAC system will certainly help polish your water quality or your effluent water quality. So will it help? Absolutely. As it relates to TOC.
Okay, can I interject in here for a minute about the TOC problem? Looking back in history of the plant, $200,000 was spent in 2005 because it was mentioned back then at a town meeting for sampling areas in order to get in line with the regulations to help this problem. So we know this is a long enduring problem, as is the manganese problem we have in the pond. So these are not things that have just popped up out of nowhere. This has been going on for a very, very long time. And with the aeration, that was tried before. And then I remember Paul Roop talked about it when he came in, because he is with Woodard and Curran, and we were looking at it. And I think now, did we raise where the intakes are for the aeration? Is that how it's working?
No, there was no modification made. We just turned it back on. And when I think when they first turned it on, it stirred everything up and they got very nervous and shut it off. And then our prior engineer for the town found in his research that that was to be expected, but that if you push through it and endure, it should improve. And that seems to be what we're seeing.
Yeah, a couple of difference I forgot to mention. We did weed harvesting this year as well.
Yeah.
And then we also turned it on in April. We didn't wait until the peak of the season where the pond is growing. There's a lot of algae and organic matter. So we wanted to do it during the cold months when it was typically dormant. So we thought we'd get out in front of it that way. And so far it seems to work. But again, we're not absolutely sure because there's been such a lack of rainfall, which one exactly, meaning the aeration, the lack of rainfall, and the weed harvest is helping the most with water quality. But maybe they all are.
Yeah, because we started aggressive weed harvesting a few years ago because we were having that severe problem at the intake with the weeds. So we've been pushing the weeds back further and further from the plant in the hopes that that would improve.
Right, but what we're talking about here is the GAC, and you've made a
Yes.
strong case for it. I think a capital budget is supportive, very much supportive of having a GAC. I think the reason that Brian and I are both here is the stunning change in the estimate and what steps need to be taken to avoid this situation in the future. To me, it says a lot that Ty and Bond had an initial quote of where it is of nearly 6 million. And I'm kind of surprised that Tetra Tech came in so low and no one questioned it. How can it be half? Personally speaking, Tetra Tech doesn't sound like the best vendor, given some of the things I've heard on this call. But are we married? Do we have to go through with this with Tetra Tech? How much money has been thrown their way? And do we have better options and a better way to spend our money? Hearing Leonora say that a report that the commission had requested didn't provide the information that you were looking for speaks volumes at $70,000+ for a report. I would certainly hold their feet to the fire and get the information you want. So those are just some random thoughts here, but there's no question in my mind that a GAC really is going to help our particular setup, a shallow pond with vegetation, with manganese and so forth. It certainly makes sense to me, but we need to explain to the town why the price doubled and what we're going to do to prevent this kind of poor management from happening again.
So for the phase of the project we're in now, we have contracted Tetra Tech to complete the remaining design and assist with bidding. So we will be working with them for the remainder of the design and bidding process. As a board, we do have the same concerns. We're not thrilled with their performance thus far. That's why we're having the bi-weekly calls to hold them accountable for progress and keep us informed.
Good.
But there is a question that I may pose of whether or not we have to do this project now, or if we should at all. It doesn't solve all the problems we have with water quality, but it solves some.
Okay.
But we do know, or I guess we can assume that if we don't do this project now, but have to do it in the future, the cost will only increase.
Okay, another couple questions I have is because initially, when they finished their pilot study, our in-house engineer informed us that PFAS is taken care of through GAC. Probably, we all figured, well, they're looking at the pilot study at Elms Meadow and they're using the same vessels. And we probably assumed incorrectly that, okay, you're putting in GAC vessels, you're taking out the TOC and PFAS, and you're taking out the PFAS at Elms Meadow using this. And it comes to pass that I had several conversations with principals at Calgon. And, they told me different things about the GAC that I brought up with Tetra Tech, mainly because of the manganese. This is, as I said, a serious problem that we've had for decades. And manganese clogs up GAC. So we have to make sure that we get the manganese out before it goes through the GAC. Then about the PFAS, they said, well, you have to use more GAC per PFAS, and that if your GAC has a lot of PFAS on it, you have to always get virgin and get it instead of being able to get reactivated. We were assuming that we could be getting reactivated GAC. What they do is they have special places where they isolate each individual facility's GAC and they handle it. It is never mixed with any other facility's GAC. So, these were questions that have come up. Another question that came up was talking to the principals at Calgon. I asked about purchase and they said, you're better off if you purchase, we'll hold it for you, deliver it. And when we deliver it, we also send along technicians to be there for the people who are installing. And he said, when you do that, you don't have to deal with terms like we would have to set for the contractors. Also, if we purchased it ourselves, we would be saving the 15 to 20% markup that the contractors put on it. Unfortunately, Tetra Tech said to me, well, are you trying to deprive contractors of profit and overhead? I said, no, just the 15 to 20% on the price of these vessels. And Brian Joyce sided with Tetra Tech. He does not feel as though we should be saving the 15 to 20%. And the other thing that stuck out to me with Tetra Tech, when they put in this information, they included sales tax because they were unaware that governments do not pay sales tax. But this is where I am on this. So I'm looking and also looking at their pricing. I had contacted Calgon back in March, and their pricing for single vessel was $225,000. That's without the pipe rack. They quoted a price to Tetra Tech when I called them the other week, because they are dealing with the same people at Tetra Tech, of $780,000 for 3 vessels with pipe racks. So it's not that there has been a huge jump in inflation, because I don't know what the pipe rack costs are. But looking at the difference between 780 and 675 with, when you're asking about these pipe racks, is not a massive jump, as they are indicating that, oh yes, we've had inflation. But anyhow, that's my 2 cents.
I just want to add that, it's unfortunate that Brian Joyce isn't here right now, but his justification for his position on ordering the vessels through the contractor was that the contractor assumes liability for storage and installation at that point.
So think of it as insurance.
Yeah, it's a valid point.
Mhm. Okay,
No, but there's no storage, because they would be holding it for us until we needed it and deliver it on site when we needed it. So storage is a specious article.
I just wanted to clarify, Brian.
I know.
I
I'm
think
just
that-
telling you what, yeah.
I think that's what they consider storage, Lee. The contractors holding on to it, yeah.
Yeah.
And as far as PFAS, it's an added benefit, but this is not a PFAS design removal system.
No.
It's a TOC. Will it capture some PFAS? Yes, because it's GAC, but it's definitely not designed to do PFAS directly.
So
Yeah, but-
if
Go
I
ahead.
may, Brian, in one of Brian's previous emails in the last week or so, he indicated, how this would be received when we look for approval with the backdrop of the recent rate study and rate increase. So Mike and Brian, is there any opinion or insight into whether or not something like this would or would not be approved at town meeting?
I've just been taking in the conversation, and this is a big, sort of flip in the, in the topic at hand. I've just been trying to absorb everything I can.
Brian, can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
If this is kind of hypothetical, but if the Water Commission approves the warrant article, I think, I think we should have Tetra Tech with the Water Commission in an open meeting between capital budget and the Water Commission, have them come in and explain
Oh, there's no question.
where they are, where they came from and where they are now.
No question. But let me just short circuit this, Chris. You've flipped the switch, and I didn't want to.
Brian, you're breaking up. We haven't heard anything so far.
Walk through a couple different issues.
Hey, Brian, we missed like the last minute of what you said.
Let me see if I can get a better signal. Hold on a second.
Sure.
Brian, sometimes it works when the video's off.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Michael? That's the answer. Hold
Yeah.
on. Okay, how about now? Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's good.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. So I will be the talking shadow.
Okay.
Oh,
Now you're gone again.
Look, just stepping away from the gag system entirely for the second. Spot. Bear with me a second. Let me just see if I can switch.
you sound good right there.
I guess sound good right here.
Yeah, you sound good.
Okay, well then I will not move even a single step, and hopefully this hopefully this continues. Okay, let's just set aside the word GAC for a second. Okay. First and foremost, capital budget's role in working with the enterprise funds is not to manage your business for you or tell you how to manage your business. It's to make sure that the decisions that you guys make, and specifically the
You're moving, Brian.
We lost you, Brian.
capital spend that you undertake, okay, which is a situation where debt.
Hey, Brian, we lost like the last minute again.
Okay, tell you what, I'm going to move entirely. Why don't you guys move on to another topic for about 5 minutes until I get this.
Okay.
Okay, we'll put this.
Yeah, so I'm going to move to a different, and I'll circle back as soon as I have a network.
Just to answer the question of, our take on whether town meeting would approve this. I've mentioned in the past, and I'll say it again. If we can explain clearly why the increase from 3.1 to 6 or whatever, that's your best hope. It's whether or not people will accept your explanation. And Brian, Host, and I are both here to try and help finesse that. And that's why we're with you guys, is to figure out, what's real, and what's in the best interest of the town, and help craft a message that has the best chance to be approved. I'll say, fortunately, we would take whatever message we craft together here, back through capital budget, our full committee, and get their take, because they're a really great sounding board as well. And they may have their own concerns. But point I'm trying to make is our best chance to succeed at town meeting is to really anticipate all the hard questions and provide good answers.
So hopefully I'm back. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Great. You asked the question how this is going to be received at town meeting. I think we need to focus on how we get from here to there. But the role of capital budget in the context of the enterprise funds, including water and sewer, okay, is not to sort of get into the management side of it. It's entirely your business. The capital issue really falls under the capital budget, and our focus is to make sure that the capital spend you guys undertake does not create a situation where either the lack of retained earnings or the excess of debt service creates either a liquidity or even a solvency issue for the enterprise fund. Okay, so that's the framework. We're not on this call to sort of step into how you manage RFPs or how you make your decisions necessarily. But when it comes to capital, we need to make sure that the steps we take today and the commitments we put in place in terms of the spend, the debt, have no possible way of creating a crisis in the foreseeable future. Not just under reasonable circumstances, but under sort of corner case circumstances. Okay. So that's the context of what I'm about to say. All right. Last year, we well over the course of the past really 18 months, we passed the GAC system, right? And we looked at your retained earnings, and we looked at your future, cash flows, and we looked at those cash flows in the context of the rate increase, and concluded there was plenty of room for the GAC system. You guys told us it was a fundamental requirement, primarily for the TOC, but it was also, I think there was also at least a perception on capital budget that this was going to take care of PFAS. And it all fit financially, it fit strategically. We approved it. It went to town meeting. It passed, right? At the Springtown meeting, we for the Springtown meeting, we were asked to approve, I guess it was, I don't know, somewhere around another $3 or $3.5 million worth of pipes. I think it was 700 for 2023, and another like 2.5 or 2.7 for 2024. And the theory was, by approving multiple years of a pipe in advance, we could take advantage of this, this discounted funding facility from the state. It's strategically made sense, financially made sense. We did a lot more work, as you guys remember, for this past Springtown meeting, because, there wasn't, having already signed up for the GAC, there wasn't as much sort of room left in your financial statements to support additional debt. And we ultimately looked at it and got comfortable, but I want to put sort of the word comfort in quotes. Okay. Comfort, your revenue forecasts, okay, in certain of the next 5 years, actually fall short of your total forecasted cash outlays, including the new debt service. So we were, it wasn't by much, but it was like $50,000, $100,000 in a couple of years. I think, somewhere around the 25, 26 area, might have even been 24. I forget. We were going to be dipping into retained earnings. We had the retained earnings to do it. Right. But as you know, the financials are variable in any given year. So we spent a lot of time, understanding, okay, what happens if you have, some pipe failures, some big capital requirements that perhaps were unforeseen, or a wet year or a dry year, what does that all mean? Right. And we ultimately got our heads around the fact that you guys were generating some free cash pretty consistently in excess of the forecast. So we were probably gonna have a little bit more to work with than what the forecast showed. And secondly, while you can't change your business overnight, we recognize the ability to push out projects if we needed to slow the capital spend in order to protect our free cash generation if things got tight. Okay. My concern, and I haven't run the numbers yet, but just instinctively, I think the very first question we have to answer is there room to just drop another $2.5 million, of debt into onto your balance sheet and into your debt service, and be comfortable with that. My instinct, just having run this as recently as whatever it was 6 months ago, I guess it was a little more than it was probably around 6 months ago. I don't remember it being that flush with sort of extra funds and margins of error. So I think that this starts to feel and look and feel a little bit like, okay, what if the question we asked back in the spring, what if we have an unforeseen capital requirement? What do we do? And the answer was, oh well, okay, we can we either have more cash than we've forecast and we're fine, or alternatively, we're gonna have to slow some things down. We're going to need to do that analysis, and we're going to need to decide whether or not you guys are going to slow some other things down to make room for this. If in fact there's not room for it, on first pass of the financial analysis. So that's the first thing I would tell you. That's just the financial capital budget hat, right? Not thinking about this strategically in any other way. But I'd also say, we really need to understand the reality of why the price doubled, because and we can circle back to, to this in a second, right? But if in fact it's true that this is just 100% inflation, okay, then it begs the question, okay, is everything else in our capital forecast, you know, going to double in price as well? Because if it does, it has pretty profound implications with what we can do and when. And I guess that's the capital budget hat, right? Now, let me just take off the financial analysis hat and go back to the sort of the strategic questions. I guess, I guess there's a question of when do we do this? Or are you guys still convinced that we want to do this or need to do this? I just don't know those answers. Those are more sort of strategic and management issues. It sounds like this isn't going to take care of PFAS, and we're still going to have a PFAS issue someday, although this may help. It sounds like this is really a solution for or a targeted solution at TOC and THL. And it sounds like we're still in a bit of a discovery period with regards to, whether we have some solutions that may be mitigating those problems already. It makes it hard for me, just from a strategic perspective to say, okay, we have to do this right now. And this is the right solution.
Yeah, I think you hit a lot of good points there, Brian. I appreciate that. And first is planning for unforeseen large capital requirements is just one piece of it, because based on what I've learned in talking to the operators, there's certainly other large priorities that need to be discussed in the future years, in the short term, in terms of upgrades, replacements, and other things that are going to greatly impact the ability to treat the water and the overall water quality. So we have to understand that if we do move forward with this GAC, as Fred said, it will polish our water. It's not going to solve all of our problems. It is a good step in overall improvement of water quality, but it's not going to be the end all and be all. We still have other things that are required. And to your point of, we are employing other mitigating factors, which thanks to Jonathan and Fred, we have been able to keep these levels under control. They're doing a great job under the difficult circumstances in treating this water. So if we are putting ourselves in a difficult financial situation for this GAC project, that's, I think, ultimately what should be looked at now is, the old saying of bang for our buck. Is this the best bang for our buck right now? If we were more flush, if this wasn't such a stretch, and also if we weren't now asking for twice as much money. So those are all factors I think you're accurately summarizing right now. I'd be curious to know, Fred and Jonathan, what do you think about that in terms of, priority setting here?
I'll start, Jonathan. Feel free to jump in. All good questions. And Brian, I appreciate you explaining your role too. That helps me, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to pull you into the technical weeds a little bit with my opinion. But
happy to go there. Just didn't want to overstep uninvited.
Right. To Chris's point, we had a conversation yesterday. Yeah, we have a lot of concerns, and I don't want to overstep my bounds either, but treatability, I'd have to agree with the comments regarding the facilities plan. It was like an asset management study, if you will, and not truly looking at treatability and into the future and what the real needs are. We struggle day to day as operators to backwash filters appropriately, to process sludge. You talk about GAC and the impacts that manganese may have on that. It will definitely reduce the run times. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of contact time for the chemicals that we do apply to treat for manganese to knock it out in its entirety before and through the filter, before it hits the GAC system. So that'll shorten those the runs of the GOC media. It'll need to be rejuvenated, regenerated, replaced. So it goes on and on and on. You know, trying to switch from gaseous chlorine to hypo for safety reasons, for reliability. You would, you know, in a nutshell, you need a new plant. Obviously, financially, that's out of the question right now, or it's not in the short-term future. So could we go back to the drawing board if you decide not to do this GAC project? Yes. And we could certainly, we'd be happy to help out and provide our input as it relates to the operations, and maybe even engage another engineer and work with them directly to maybe provide another plan. So obviously financially, you have to understand your position as far as it relates to this project, but we're here to help. I hope that's clear. I'm just careful because, you know, I don't want to overstep my bounds. So, you know, let me know if you have a specific question, I would be happy to answer it.
Don't
I mean-
think you're overstepping your boundaries, because you're an asset between you and Jonathan to help us out with decisions. Trust us.
Okay, there-
And I read from that is that, you know, installing this $6-7 million GA system is not going to solve all the problems, and it's still going to be a difficult water source to treat. It will help, but
It's an extremely shallow pond. As I said, it's alive and changes seasonally based on weather patterns. So yeah, there's going to be ongoing challenges. And unfortunately, the technology, the plant's 45 plus years old. And for an example, I know you guys don't know the detail of the operations of the plant. We don't really have the ability to filter to waste, meaning once we backwash a filter, it goes back online and we try to water it down, if you will, or polish the effluent in the clear well, because we can't filter that out of the stream. And that's really unheard of these days from a technological standpoint. You should be able to filter the waste until the water begins to clean up and your coagulation, your chemical process and your dosing kind of hone in. And after a filter's been washed, I mean, that's basic stuff. You know, there's a long list. And I'd be happy to go through it on site. I'm sure Jonathan would as well, if anybody else would like to do a physical walk through the plant to understand what we're talking about. And I'm sure that now is not the time, but I'd be happy to educate the public and the rest of the boards.
Well, let me ask just a broad-based question. You know, things like no filter to waste, and you know, some of the other things that you're doing to you're not doing a fix on no filter to waste, but are there examples like that would get you more bang, you know, to steal Chris's term, more bang for your buck than jumping straight to a GAC? Or is this, or maybe asked differently, if you had $7 million to spend, which is fundamentally where we're, you know, or $6 million to spend, which is fundamentally where we're landing on this GAC system, is that the best place to, is that the place to spend it to achieve maximum impact?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
I don't know. I would engage an engineer and do a treatability study, and maybe some things as far as contact time for treating for manganese would require adding some pipe out in the back parking lot to put like a serpentine pipe back there to create more contact time for potassium permanganate to work, to knock it out before it hits the filter. You could look at not only converting to liquid chlorine, but you could look at improving your filter performance. Like I said, the filter waste options, other types of media. It's hard to say though, without a true treatability study, and immediate needs study by an engineer. With Tetra Tech, like I'd mentioned, did more of an asset management plan than a treatability study. So it's hard for me to say where the best place to put the 7 million, or how many different things we could do with it based on today's pricing. That's another challenge, as you see. So I hope that
To me, it sounds like an internal gut replacement or additions could be a little bit more beneficial. Well, you know, again, I agree. A treatable study with an engineer can go a long way, maybe.
I have
Okay,
a question.
okay.
Good, Mike.
The core problem in front of us is total organic compounds, correct?
Mhm.
and both Ty and Bond and Tetra Tech proposed GAC to take care of your TOC problem. Is that correct?
I think it was because of the pilot study, the RFP went out for the GAC system for this. Ty
That's
and
not,
Bond
I
not
don't
doing
understand.
study on it. There was that $300,000 pilot. study.
I'm asking the question.
Okay.
Did both Ty and Bond and Tetra Tech propose a GAC solution for our TOC problem? Is that what our consultants, both consultants
No.
are agreeing on?
Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, but Tetra Tech did the pilot, so they made the recommendation.
Right.
We asked Ty and Bond to bid on it, but we didn't ask
Yep.
them their opinion.
I see. Okay, I get it now.
And I
Okay.
actually asked Woodard and Curran, who I work for, what do they think it would cost? And they said, there's no way, it's gonna be 6 million, 6 to 7 million. Because they built, I don't know, I can't remember the number, 8 to 10 of these in the region. In recent years. And so they've watched the price spikes.
So how do we come to an answer on how to keep our TOC below government regulation? Are we still searching for an answer on that? On how to reduce our or how to maintain our TOCs below the federal and state standard?
That would be GAC.
And that's the only way?
Again, we can look at it through a treatability study and maybe other components and retrofits to the plant can prove it from if you follow a drop of water right through the process. But it's hard for me to say until, the study's done, we review technology,
Right,
what
Chris.
we have to work with.
Chris, earlier in the conversation, you had some skepticism on whether we should proceed with GAC, whether or not it was really needed. What are your feelings now, having heard some of this additional conversation?
I mean, I've been sort of posing that question for the last couple of months, and this will improve overall water quality, and it improves the finished product. And some answers I got previously was that regulations will only get stricter. If we don't do it now, it's something we will likely have to do in the future. And GAC is, from my understanding, the most suitable option to treat the water in the manner we need to. So we could go back to engineers and do studies and pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to explore other technologies. But this, I believe, is the most common in addressing this issue. So again, it's if we didn't have the financial backdrop and the increased cost and the challenge that poses, it would be a much easier answer. We may be managing TOC levels adequately now, but that may not be the case forever.
Yep. So it sounds to me like we are back with a GAC that we want to install for the town. And the problem is how to explain to the town that we mishandled the original estimate, and that the original estimate was half of what it should have been. And basically bite the bullet and say, we need this, the actual cost given the actual estimate confirmed by 2 vendors is the number that's in front of the town right now, rather than saying that it's an increase due to COVID or inflation.
Okay, Michael, I take exception to what you said that we mishandled this, because if you take a look at the information that Tetra Tech
Yeah.
provided, there is
Lee,
a
what would you
1.4
say to the town if
but
you
I'm
were
saying
up
there's a
in
one-
front of them? What would you say to the town to say why we've doubled the price in a sentence?
in a sentence.
In a sentence.
That's what we get at town meeting.
That's what we, oh, sometimes you get a little more.
Nobody
No.
listens beyond the sentence.
There was a miscalculation in.
Okay, miscalculation. I'll take back
In-
mishandled,
A
miscalculation.
miscalculation
Yeah.
in the price that was given to us initially and was provided for the SRF funding by
Okay.
the engineering company.
Okay.
And that's the truth.
There you go. That's
That
what
is
we're
the truth.
after.
So let me just, okay, so that's the sentence. Let's take that and put it aside. I just want to probe this for a second. Did they miscalculate or did they just get this completely wrong? I know it's not you guys, but but Tetra Tech, I mean, did they just, or did they bait and switch? And I'm just asking.
That's a good question. As an engineer that does estimates, I don't know how you go from one to another.
I don't either, but it's not, to Michael's point, it is definitively not COVID supply chain and inflation. You don't miss by 100% because of that.
No. What was the Leah, Chris?
Over
What was
100.
what was that big ticket item? I'm drawing a blank on the that they didn't put in the original estimate. It was a $300,000-$400,000 item.
It's something to do with the chemical process. Fred, Jonathan, if you could.
Cost of the vessels?
No, I thought it was the
No, they increased the
hypochlorite.
Don't matter.
contingency. I'm looking at it right now. What it is, furnish and install the site electrical. They increased that by almost 200,000. The furnish and install the treatment system. They increased that by 1.4 million.
Well, there's a question
Yeah.
right there.
Right.
That's where I have the problem because as I said, I talked to Calgon about the costs
Yep.
and it
So-
wasn't.
So and the contingency was what? I don't have anything in front of me. 1.2
All right, the
million?
contingency went from 825 to 1.165.
Right.
And that was a big one.
That's
and the
almost
electrical.
50%.
Right.
The electrical went from 265 to 458, which was big. The new building.
So did the
only-
design change from wherever they started from that
No.
initial
Mm-mm.
estimate?
No.
Then they went to 25% design, and at 25% design, we got the 6 million number, 5.8.
Yeah, it was a 30%. Yeah, at the 30%
Right.
total. That's where it was.
Right, and when you came to town meeting for the 3.1, what was the
Or
design
3.6.
stage? I'm sorry, 3.6. What was the design stage?
Oof.
This was their estimate when they were doing their study.
Okay,
When
so
they
it
were
was
doing-
before it went to design.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, so it was a rough estimate.
Yeah,
Yes,
but I
correct.
mean, to be off of $1.4 million
Yeah.
in the price of it.
Right.
And it's my understanding that Tetra Tech had been involved with the town and the plant, certainly the pilot study, for several years. They should have had a better understanding of some of the environmental conditions and the circumstances related to this installation. Watching the previous meetings, the gentleman from Tetra Tech was very confident in his number. He made certain comments
Yep.
demonstrating his confidence in the number.
In the 3.6, Chris, or the,
Correct,
yep,
yes.
okay.
And it was a big mess on the part of Tetra Tech. And ultimately, that's where it came from.
Well, one issue I kept bringing up with Tetra Tech that I did not feel comfortable with is that most of their experience was not in the Northeast.
Okay, whatever. I
They
mean,
were, no,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
the big thing though, Michael. They were
Mm.
dealing with California and
Mm.
the South.
It's very different. Yeah.
West,
Yeah.
and it's totally different.
Okay.
It's like when you see that window commercial, oh, we don't put the same windows in Vermont that we put in Florida. And yeah,
Yeah, the labor price and prevailing wages, from here to Arizona is gonna be completely different. So, but going forward, with this conversation.
Yeah.
They, like Chris said, they gave us a presentation, beautiful PowerPoint slides. This is where it's gonna be, and the gentleman was, and that's how I voted.
Yeah.
I'm on the record for voting that way.
right.
And you felt good. Save a little money. And this is where we ended up in. And I have been tossing and turning since when we met with them in April. This is why we kind of pointed the water commission is an alternate basis with Lee and Chris to be attending their meetings.
Yeah.
So,
You know, that meeting was way after the end of May. It was in June sometime.
right.
Because we
Right.
didn't find out until the end of May, when the town found out in the beginning of May about this price increase.
So let me ask the commission informally. I'll just make a statement, call it a straw man, okay? And then we can tear it down. But the straw man would be this. Our engineers and our plant managers, Woodard and Curran, have recommended a GAC treatment system for, no, okay. Then we'll stop, I'll stop right there.
We're not,
Okay.
we're not in a position to make any recommendations. We're not.
Okay. All right, so let me leave that out. Let me
Yeah.
leave out Woodard and Curran. So our engineering consultants, two of them, have both recommended to the town a GAC system to address our mission to keep TOCs as low as we can, below federal and or state standards. And that if the commission believes that and recommends that as well, then that should be the basis for your warrant request, that the commission believes this is the best way forward. Then the next statement I'll make is the consultant who has been advising us on proceeding with a GAC miscalculated the initial request and have revised their request to the current amount in front of town meeting. Are you comfortable saying that?
You know, the only problem I have is consultant now, because you said it was,
Engineering firm would.
yeah, the engineering, firm,
I'm-
our paid engineering firm and our town engineer.
Okay.
But not the town engineer today. You know,
No,
the
Previous.
one that-
yeah, the town
yeah,
engineer that
it's
was,
just-
Right.
yeah.
So if,
project engineer.
I'm saying if both of those things you can support, then I would think you can go ahead and approve your warrant article. The problem will be, and it's the problem we knew going into this meeting, is convincing the town meeting that this is a good use of the town's money. And Brian, you were switching networks, but I wanted to express to the Water Commission that we on capital budget are here to support them and help them get it through town meeting if we on capital budget believe in it. And I still feel that way. And that's why I'm attending these meetings, is to figure out the way forward. Let's make sure that the GAC is the way the town really wants to go, that the Water Commission wants the town to go to a GAC.
I'd say needs, not wants.
Okay, well, there's an interesting distinction there too.
Yep.
Okay, so need is a stronger word. And that's a very persuasive word too. So that's just how I'm thinking right now, and perhaps trying to find a way forward here and get us to what you need as a Water Commission, which is some kind of support and assurance that if you put up this warrant, you've got a good chance that it's going to be approved by town meeting.
Okay, one
So-
other point I want to bring up, talking to Brian the other day, is about the rate
Brian,
study. Brian Host
okay,
is about the rate study. We are in a position where the rate study that we presented at town meeting, we do not have anyone we can discuss it with, because the two people who did it are no longer employed by the town. With the last rate study we did with Woodard and Curran, when we had questions, we went back to the people who did the rate study. This one, we're like, well, you know, we don't know this. What about what's happening here? Did you put that in? And I think we need a review of the rate study. to see what's coming down the block, because we also have all these new developments in town, and I don't know if anything was included about that extra income. And there's also the income that the board voted on twice to be put in that they didn't put in. So these are just some areas. I think if we can get some other practical advice on this, not to do another rate study, but just to get advice on what ours says and where there may be issues that, hey, here's a pocket of money that they didn't realize is coming in. Do you understand what I said?
Yeah, no, but I
I'm saying,
think we're trying to,
this might
yeah.
be helpful and,
that's
going
certainly
down the road to say you don't have money.
a
but
big
instead,
agenda
here it
item for the
is.
commission to take up.
Right.
But
Let me make a couple suggestions.
Great.
Because I don't want to go too far down the path of, let's sort of, figure out how to sell this to town meeting. I think there's some questions that still need to be answered. To me, and you'll hear this, when this comes in front of capital budget. So I'm just telling you exactly what I'm going to be focused on, before I actually vote as a committee member, right? To me, there are three questions. Do we need this? Number one. Number two, if so, when? And number three, how do we make it fit? Like those are the three critical questions.
What was your third point? How do we
Make it fit
make it
financially?
fit?
How do you make it fit financially? Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, just you broke up there.
Yeah.
I'm just taking notes.
Because just, voting it through and approving the bonding, there's a lot of financial analysis that has to take place before you can say, okay, we need this, we need it now, and it fits, right? I mean, we have to make sure that it fits financially. So let's just hit each one of those in order, because if the answers, if we don't get to a positive answer on either one, on any of those, you don't move on to the next, right? So that the question of need, what I think I'm hearing is that there's consensus that there is a need to either reduce or further control TOC. Is that the consensus? Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah, I would say yes on that.
Okay. So now let's really tightly define the need. Is the definition of that need because our TOCs are rising towards a threshold? Choice A. Choice B, they're all over the place, and we might breach a threshold in a way that actually caused governmental intervention. Or choice C, we're anticipating, but don't we really know that the government's going to reduce the threshold and it would put us in violation, and we would have no time to respond.
It's a Jonathan.
I'd say you're closer to B. I'd say there's probably no chance of the regulation being reduced. However, I want to be clear that we are in compliance, but the numbers we're dealing with are above average. And really, technically, you cannot predict what will happen.
Okay. And so we're in compliance. How far are we away from being out of compliance?
Like 30%.
I mean, is it just a bad year would put us out of compliance, or is it?
It would be probably a couple years, is my guess. Fred?
Okay. And so if let's just say we test out of, above the threshold in a given, what's the measurement period? Is it a year that they look at, or is it every quarter, every month? I mean, how long do we have to be out of compliance before we have to react?
Well, there's a running average that gets updated every quarter. What happens when we violate it? I would defer to Fred a little.
And given it's a running average, so the historical numbers have a huge influence on what the future running average is. You can kind of figure out how bad it would have to be and for what period of time.
Correct.
To, for your running average to breach threshold, right?
Correct.
Do we have any sense as to how, how bad and how long this would have to be before we were in breach?
Okay, so right now, so the magic number is 80. Our numbers that I'm looking at are between 50 and 65.
Those are the current test numbers.
That's the current average.
That's
The
the
current-
sorry, that's the current, okay, that's the current range is 50 to 65. These are point numbers. These are not running average numbers.
No, this is the running average is between 50 and 65, and the threshold where you're in violation is 80.
And that's
Okay.
parts per trillion.
No, this is THMs.
Okay. This is THMs, not TOCs.
Well, they're influenced by TOCs, but yes, these are.
Okay, got it. Okay, so this is the one where they really got it. Okay, you reduce TOCs to reduce THMs. They're hand in hand.
Yes.
Okay. So when you say a running average, what is the period of a running average? Is it trailing 6 months? Is it trailing 12 months? Is it trailing
Trailing-
3 years?
12 months.
So TTM. Okay.
Annual
And-
run.
It's basically your LTM monthlies. Okay. Okay. And we're between 50 and 65 over the course of each month over the course of the past 12 months. That's the range you'd see. Is that accurate? Okay.
Yes,
Is it okay? And is it typical that is the range seasonally impacted? Said
It has-
differently, let me be more clear, right? In a typical year, would you see a range of 50 to 65, and you typically see the 50, I don't know, in the winter and the 65 in the summer, or vice
Yeah,
versa,
so,
or whatever?
correct.
Is there?
Yes, let's see, the second and third quarter, which is basically the summer, is when we get most concerned. And as I mentioned in my first intro, the first couple of years when I came on, we were really much higher, much worse off than we have been for the past 12 to 24 months.
Okay, but it sounds like the past 12 months were a little bit of a gift. Some good work, but also a good gift from a weather perspective. How was it? Not this past year, but last summer. How did our numbers look?
Give me one moment. But they were last summer. I think they were decent. It was last summer is kind of when we started to really get it to turn a corner.
Okay.
I'm close. Hold on. So the running average for last year, same time period, we were at 56 to 61. So basically, we're in the same position last year where we are right now.
Yep.
Year before that, I'm close. I'd have to dig. Please continue the conversation while I look.
Okay.
Okay.
Jonathan, has over the course of the last 4 years or in recent memory, has the regulation increased or become more strict
No,
as it relates to? No. Okay.
no, and I don't anticipate that happening for, I don't know, not anytime in the immediate future.
Chris, I think the only regulations that we may see changing are the PFAS ones, because
Yeah.
that's been a national topic.
Right now, the nation's very focused on PFAS and lead and copper.
Understood. Let's circle back to that in a second. So what happened? Let's just say hypothetically, this number, we lose control of this range for whatever reason. Okay. Climate change. And the number goes above 80, breaks 80. What happens if our TTM breaks 80? If our running average breaks 80?
Fred, would there be a consent? I don't know how many consecutive quarters you'd have to be over, but I imagine a consent would come eventually.
Yeah, it all depends. I mean, if you're up and if you're above, below, they're going to address it. DEP is going to step in at some point, so you got to do something. If-
Totally understood. So what I'm trying to understand, right, is it's really the same question I asked with regards to, you know, what if we have to scale back capital expense, right? We've got, how much time do we have to make an adjustment if we have a crisis reading on THMs?
If you receive a consent order, DEP understands that you can't just do it in a day, that you would have to construct something. So they would work with you on that.
Okay, and how long do your THMs have to be out of, you know, above threshold before you draw consent from DEP?
Yeah, I can't answer that accurately. I'd have to reach out to a regulator that I know and ask that question. I haven't experienced that.
Yep.
So I'd have to get back to you.
Right. I mean, the hope would be that we just stay in this 56 to, you know, 50 to 65 range and never go there. But we kind of need to know what, you know, what happens, right? I'm trying to define, at least in my head, maybe everyone else doesn't care, but you know, when I say we need this system, that's what it means to me, right? Others may feel differently, and I'm just one vote on the committee, but I'm trying to put a real definition around the word need. Okay, so the open question, and if we could get an answer on that, is, you know, literally what happens if our number sort of either drifts up or spikes up? How long do we have to be out of compliance? And how much time do we have, you know, before we're actually told that we have to do something, or no, just flat out know that we have to do something, right? I don't think we need to wait to be told. But, you know, how long does this number need to be out of compliance, certainly before, you know, we're told to do something by the DEP, and how much time do they give us to do it? Is that the right question to do?
Yeah, I could get an answer.
Okay, that would be incredibly helpful to me, at least. And I apologize if I'm just wasting everybody's time, but
Not at all.
you know,
These are
Let's
good
see if I
questions.
can get you an answer right now.
Now, Brian, it looks as though you're just trying to see how we can prioritize this, if it's a dire emergency, or if it's something that, okay, we know it has to come and we have the plans and can put it off. You know, something else that has been
I'm just trying to put a framework around this. Is this a regulatory requirement or threat of a regulatory requirement where we need to make this our single highest priority? Where you, not we, but you need to make this your single highest priority? Or is this something that you know you need to do at some point in time, and this is the right time to do it?
Yeah,
And that
I
gives you
understand what you're saying. Yeah.
And that gives you the information you need to decide whether or not you want to do this now and push some other things off, if that's what the financial model tells you, or whether you have other higher priorities, whether they be, you know, treatability in the plant or you know, or other mains or whatever it is. I mean, I don't, you know, your priorities are your priorities. I just need to make sure, as a member of capital budget, that I can say that what you're signing up to spend fits.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You know,
Well, I remember 25 years ago, there was a priority about dredging the pond, and that never happened.
well, different people, different priorities. So again, we're not here to tell you what your priorities are. I'm just trying to think, I'm thinking through the framework of how do you set your priorities. And look, if we're in crisis mode right now and we need this system right now, we do this system right now. We pay what it costs. And if the financial model tells us that, you know, we can't lump another $2.5 million in debt in there without making other changes, then you just need to recognize we need to push some other things out. Well, you need to, and we need to recommend that you do.
Well, you know, our rate study that was passed by town meeting was for the 3.6 million. So
Correct.
adding that let's just go with the number I put in the article, 3.5. You know, we're gonna see a reduction in revenue because we're gonna be paying back more debt.
Well, it's not a reduction in revenue; it's an increase in expense and debt expense plus debt service, right?
Right.
So yeah, and look, the just to be clear, so and to step back where I am, just I haven't done the math yet, but I've got the math in my head, okay? Because I just did the math back in March and I know what it said. So when we looked at when we approved the GAC, the rate study was built to pay for the GAC. So we know it fit. And we looked at the math and it fit, right? we spent more time on your model back in the spring, because in addition to the commitment that we've already made on the GAC under the existing rate structure, we added another, whatever it was, $3.5 or $4 million worth of pipes, right? Including accelerating spend on the 2024s. And so we needed to make sure that that fit, even pulling it forward. And so we did a whole bunch of math, and it did fit, right? So, but there wasn't a lot of margin for error. In fact, there was, if there were unforeseen I remember the conclusion was that if there were unforeseen circumstances, we would either need to rely on unforecasted free cash, which we've experienced in the past, right?
Yeah.
You guys have generated that. So that was one margin for it. That was one source of margin to absorb any unforeseen circumstance. And if that didn't materialize, then the alternative is that we would have to slow capital spends, flatten the curve, for lack of better terms, okay, on the rate of cap spend, so that we did not continue to add new debt and debt service. So we're now layering this. So fast forward to so as of the spring, we had no margin for error, but we had two ways to deal with it. Okay, that gave us comfort that we could handle this as long as we were astute and made adjustments as the future sort of played out its hand of cards. Now we're talking about dropping another $2.5 million in, and I will be shocked if the existing model has cushion for another $2.5 million unless we generated a huge amount of free cash. We're just sitting on way more retained earnings than what we were talking about back in the spring. I mean, that would take some of the edge off of this, but it's not going to take it's not going to be $2.5 million. So my guess is just instinctively, having done this exercise 6 months ago, you're going to need to look at your capital commitments and figure out, if you push some other things out to make this fit. But again, I think the steps to get there are, number one, do we need this? Number one. Number two, if so, when? And the answer is maybe yes and now, right? And I'm fine with that. But that brings you to the third question is, how do you make it fit? And we'll get to that next. But I think the very first step is, let's define the need, right? And I don't know, our team at Woodard and Kern may come back and say, you know what, we're banging around in this 50 to 65. We're comfortable. We're probably going to stay here. And even if we didn't, we would have years to respond. Then it becomes something you need to do, but not necessarily right now. You can still choose to do it right now, right? But that just means that you're possibly pushing something else out.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I'm sort of guessing here because I wasn't involved this number of years ago, but would it be fair to say, Jonathan and Lee, that when this started and the pilot study was even initiated, I mean, are we talking about 3+ years ago when our THM levels may have been?
It
No,
was just when I got on the board.
it was last winter.
That's when, yeah.
Okay.
I just had a crazy question here. If we switch things around and put it in as a PFAS system instead of a TOC, will it, as a PFAS system, take out TOCs?
Yeah, I think it's a similar system. It's just twice as big.
The PFAS system?
Yes.
Well, because they said something about double rows of vessels, but they didn't indicate if it was the same size.
No, I'm not sure that they specified that, but my impression was that they basically were saying it would be double the number of vessels for PFAS.
Yeah, but if we put in a PFAS system, would it take out the TOCs? That's, do we look down that road?
I would lean on Brian a little bit. My gut says yes, that it's the same system. It's just larger.
Yeah,
Brian,
more filtration.
Jump in.
Brian Joyce.
Joyce.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, I had 10:30 on my calendar, so I apologize for missing the beginning. Yeah, if it was only a PFAS system, I think we talked about it would be an ion exchange and not a GAC filter potentially. And I need to check whether Ion Exchange would remove TOC, which is the primary reason for our GAC system. You know, to get the TTHMs and HA5s in compliance. So an Ion Exchange system is significantly more cost, without knowing the numbers offhand. That was part of our discussion, is significantly more costly in the media than a GAC system.
So folks, I need to apologize. It's 10:30 and I need to be at a funeral service in 30 minutes. So I need to drop. I would encourage you to continue the conversation. What I'd like to suggest is that perhaps we can, you should continue your conversation. We have a question outstanding with that we need answers to. I think, before we can put this sort of in framework, and we should grab those answers and regroup really as soon as possible. And in the interim, I think everyone should think about these three questions, based on in part driven by the answer we get from Woodard and Curran. And again, is this a need based on the regulatory definition and what would happen if, under various circumstances? Number two, if it's a need, when do we need to do this? And, if we cross those two thresholds, then we have to figure out how we make it fit. So I'd encourage everyone to look at the 10-year capital forecast that was circulated, I think, last year. I know I was just clicking through old folders and I saw one. And just look at, what's what's on that list for each year and figure out, if you had to push $2.5 million worth of stuff out, what would it be?
Yeah, I don't think there's a problem with that because we've been doing that over the last 10 years.
Right. But I think those are the thresholds to get, through committees and into town meeting. And I don't want to steer you to an answer, but if it's entirely possible that based on the the regulatory question I asked, that you may decide that this is an important thing to do, but it's not an immediate requirement, or you may decide it's an immediate requirement. But either way, that dictates where we go next.
See, well, in my opinion, though, since we started down this road with the TOC remediation,
yep,
the conversation across the country has totally flipped to PFAS. And I think that's where the conversation is going to continue.
It may. So I need to leap. But when we say
Okay.
I'll just park you with this thought on the question of when, right? It's either now, it's in a few years after you take care of a couple of other items that you may deem higher priorities. Okay. Or it may be you decide to just focus on treatability until you're ready to do an entire plant replacement. Because if PFAS is twice the cost of this system, now you're talking about a $12 million investment on top of all the other stuff that we need to do up there. At what point do you just say, okay, we're going to focus on treatability in the near term and just aggregate our capacity and pay down our debt and get ready for a new plant at some point?
Right.
Because the last thing you want to do is spend 6 now or 12 now and then have to do a whole plant at some point in the future anyway.
I mean, that is really the big picture.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's why I think there's just a lot of concern about this, particularly with increasing costs about now or later, because as Jonathan said, it's an aging plant.
Right. And so I really think you need to have a clear vision on that before we go ask people for another $2.5 million and spend $6 million on this system. We really need to understand what is, you need to be able to understand and articulate where are we going? What are we, where are we going? What are we doing and why?
Well, that's true. And if we get a new plant, then we probably wouldn't need the system.
Well, the new system would be part of the plant, but you don't want to do a new plant one piece at a
Well,
time.
no, not necessarily, because there would be a different system in the plant to take
Well,
care
that may
of.
be that. It may be an entirely different system. And I'm not. Look, the last thing I want to do is well, I shouldn't say that. Instinctively, the last thing you want to ever do is to say, oh, let's just do a new plant. But if that's the right answer, let's not be foolish in the interim. All right. So anyway, I truly apologize. I have to jump. But
Go
I
ahead,
think-
Brian.
I think these
Thank-
regulatory questions, will allow us to work through the steps on this framework. And I do think we should go through this framework before, asking for a big ticket item and spending the money. That's my suggestion. All right.
All right, Brian.
All right. Have a great day.
Thanks for coming aboard the meeting.
Absolutely.
So for the GAC warrant article, I just say we just probably make a motion just to approve it, and we'll just tailboard it. How you guys feeling about?
Well,
we
the
had
thing,
the-
if we approve it, we can always pull it.
Correct.
If we don't approve it, we can't do anything.
And
So, and we have to have it in order to get it on the warrant. We
right,
are at the deadline. So we're just,
I did hear that that got pushed out to the 27th. Can anyone verify that?
nope.
last thing I saw was the
I haven't heard it.
16th today.
Okay.
I'll make a motion and then we'll have a discussion at a later date. Make a motion to approve the warrant article for the GAC system for an additional $3.5 million. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye. All right, so
Brian, can you get on so we can talk to you? Unmute, please. What about the SRF funding? Is there anything in train about that?
I think, so based on the 75% design, I think we should move forward to ask for that additional money of the SRF funding. And if through this process, we decide not to move forward with the project or table it, like Brian Host was suggesting, we'd probably just communicate that with the state and hold off on all the all the SRF, borrowing.
When do we have to start the SRF borrowing? Is there a date to initiate it?
It was in October. I don't have it at my fingertips, but it was,
Well,
I think, October 14th.
Correct. Yeah, to get the revised application, it would be the 14th.
No, but I'm saying we don't have to initiate the money being borrowed at that point. Right?
No, this is for
Okay.
approval.
All right.
So just going through the high level, I think it's still a good idea. I mean, obviously that I don't feel it's wasted money to have a design in hand, whether you pull the trigger now or pull the trigger later and modify that design somehow, so that there's still value in the design you've done thus far.
Because
agree.
we paid for most of it already, right?
No, not because you paid for it, but it's.
No, but I'm saying we did pay for it. I just want to make that clear. We paid for most of it, the design.
Yeah, I don't know what the billing is right now, but yeah, you're
We're at
at
the
75%.
yep.
And just to circle back on sort of the theme of that conversation is, if we don't spend $3 or $6 million on the GAC system right now, what would be a higher priority or among a higher priority? Certainly rebuilding the sludge lagoons would be something that should be discussed. And I think that would have significant impact on the day-to-day operation of the plant. So if we are gonna, go down that path, I think that's something that should be discussed at some point.
Yeah, we have a large list of things that potentially we could tie together to improve overall treatment process. And we discussed some of those yesterday, Chris, so it'd be good to have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, if you could get the list out to us so that we could look at it to be prepared for the next conversation we're having.
Well, yeah, the short list would be sludge, filter to waste, and
Contact time for permanganate.
yeah,
Mhm.
chlorine gas to hypo, and
But that doesn't really. Go ahead.
I mean, as you all know, the chlorine conversion and filter to waste are in the GAC plan. So, I mean, that, as Brian said, that's
Yeah.
valuable to have in hand.
We have that design.
That's my short list.
get design, if once it's shovel ready, I mean, we can pull the trigger.
Yeah, I'd always, those are all treatment plant things. I'd always want to keep water main stuff on there too in this, because there's 100-year-old mains out there that we're holding off on paving roads. The roads are falling apart because there's 100-year-old mains underneath. So those should get thrown in the mix too as a high priority.
Okay, Brian, have you heard anything about the 3A project that we're supposed to be replacing the pipe from Beechwood to the Situate line? I've been hearing about that for 3 to 4 years.
So I talked to DOT last week, not on the water main part of that project, but I think it's due to go out to bid for construction December of 2023. So construction probably summer 2024-ish.
All right, so we have to look for that to be replacing that water main.
Right, yeah, so that's a non-participating cost. And I'd highly recommend doing that because you're saving on the, kind of all the labor. Basically, you're just paying for the pipe and the trench work. It's a lot cheaper than going out and doing it yourself.
No, I know, because that has been on our list for a long time, right, Fred? It's just been pushed down the road, waiting.
Yeah, the state's, it's been pushed. I mean, we first started talking about this, I think, in 2014, and it's finally coming to bid 10 years later, so.
Mhm.
Any other discussion on the GAC?
Yeah, just one. I did talk to our head engineer about DEP's response to a non-compliant sample. So whether it was out 1 quarter, they would potentially say, all right, what happened? If it was an extremely high number, they would really want us to take a look and try to figure out what's going on. If we had 2 consecutive hits or we were out of our annual average, if like one high number blew that out, then we would potentially receive a consent order. And they understand. They would work with us. They'd give you a year and a half to, make, if you had to go out and do some modifications to the plan or design or build a GAC system, they'd allow you the time to do that. Even if you couldn't do it in a year and a half, if they see you're working towards it, they will work with you to implement whatever treatment that's needed. But it's very possible, based on, how they're staffed and who's looking, that you could get a response to 1 out of compliance sample. And, I didn't want to say this, I didn't know the best way to explain it, but, just because we're between 60 or 70, that's still not good. Just because we're under 80, 60s is not good. And, that can be affected by anything, long residence time in the distribution system. As you've seen, the spikes we've seen with weather, rain conditions, and other things happening in the pond. So this is always going to be a lingering, challenging issue.
And what the consumers will see is dirty water, smelly water, bad tasting water. So we're trying to stay in compliance, but also we have a water quality issue that we know we'll have.
And we certainly know that we have algae species, that what we call the stinkers, that will react with the chemicals to create some of those taste and odor issues in the system.
What is good? What level is good? If 60 is not good, what is good?
I've seen, with the right type of treatability, you can get them down in the 20s and 30s fairly easily.
Has there been any prediction or estimate on what the GAC could get us down to?
Yeah, I don't have that number in front of me. Jonathan?
No, I don't either.
Brian, do you know?
I don't offhand, but ask that question of Tetra Tech. It should have been in the pilot study.
Yeah.
So you could ask them on your next meeting.
Chris, are you doing the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
So the big question that Brian Host was asking is, if we need it, when? So is there a consensus? Because I'm certainly not an expert to answer that. What is the consensus now? Crickets.
Yeah, it is crickets and I don't have a,
I don't know.
it's had.
I don't like answering that question because we didn't do a real treatability study. So you really know what you're looking at as far as what the plant needs are as it relates to water quality right through the process.
I'm gonna see, I think Fred just gave the best answer. I kind of agree with that. I think a real treatability study would probably benefit everybody. Instead of a joking aside, this window needs, caulking around, the left side. What do you folks think? Like Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, it's obviously a tough question to answer because we have new regulations that are going to be coming out, and then you have we're right on the threshold of a large spike, and we don't comply with the THMs. So, do we need it right now?
It's
we haven't gone out of compliance. So it's
Jonathan, what do you need right now?
you can say a lot of things.
Say it nicely, please.
Following the meeting later today, I will look for the answer to what the predicted TOC removal will be.
Okay, the other problem though too is, Brian, we discussed before the $75,000 plant study that Tetra Tech did that was supposed to be an evaluation of the future water demands, future regulations, and general O&M. And we all didn't feel that it met that criteria.
Do you have that RF? What RFP was that part of?
I'm looking at the one dated for September 19 for the 2020 special town meeting done by Jason.
All right, if you have that, are you looking at it digitally or are you looking at it?
No, I'm looking at the hard copy. I have the hard copy right here. Want me to take a picture of it and send it to you?
Yeah, I can, I'll track it down I'll have to look at what the details of that were. So
Yeah.
you're looking at the deliverable, is that right?
I mean, the report that we got did not seem like it matched what we went to town meeting for.
But did the report match the RFQ that went out or the RFP?
I don't know what the RFP was. We never saw it
Okay.
because
All
that
right,
was
we'll
who
find
did it.
out.
I thought it was between Jason, you, and Michelle.
It
So
doesn't ring a bell. We can find the RFP, and I mean, a lot of times, well, I can't say a lot of times. Sometimes just titles are thrown in on town meeting votes that don't.
well, no, this is the project description that I read to you.
Okay, say it one more time.
This evaluation will take into account future water demands, future regulations, and general O&M. And, we presumed that it was going to be showing us whether or not we should be changing, maybe filter media, going maybe into, well, what do they have at Ware River? Don't they have GAC in their filter bed, Steve? Or their green sand, or anything that might change what we're doing in relationship to the results we're getting.
So I can't answer any of those. Let me track down the report you're looking at, read it, and then we'll
Okay, yes,
compare it to what was
Because I
town
think-
meeting the RFP.
that might give us some indication of what we're looking at with this TOC system, or whether or not other changes can be made into the plant that can incorporate other needs under the same umbrella.
So that study that you're referring to, Lee, the capital improvement plan is the result of that. Is that correct? The one
It
that
says
told
it-
us that the windows need to be resealed and whatnot.
Yep. Mhm.
Okay,
It was
so-
called the Water Treatment Plant Capital Improvement Plan.
Okay, so it seems like there's a difference between a treatability study, but did that lead to the pilot study for the GAC in any way?
No, because they were both went out at the same time.
Okay, so it's not like that was.
Because
supposed
of
to-
that, well, no, because at that same town meeting, we put in the 3.6 million for the GAC final design and construction.
Okay.
So it was done.
So the GAC recommendation and the pilot study was not a result of a treatability study at any point.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
Fred, is a treatability study done by an engineer like Time Bond or Tetra Tech or something like that?
Or Woodard and Curran, yeah.
Yeah,
Karen,
any of the engineering firms, Weston and Sampson, they all.
how much does something like that cost, any of you?
You know, you'd have to kind of look at, see what they suggest, maybe create a shopping cart where you can pick and choose. I mean, you could probably spend, hard to say. You could spend hundreds of thousands, or you could focus it like you did on a GAC facility and, pilot that. But I'd hate to throw a number out until I would meet with our team and say, what's the best way we can bring the most value to you? And based on, obviously the plant, its age, its capabilities, its technological, it's a dinosaur, and what would that take? And so I would have to have that conversation. I'd be happy to invite somebody in to talk with you all as well.
Yeah,
Alright.
but anyhow, this plan here that we voted on at the 2020 special town meeting, it was a 20-year capital plan for the water treatment plant, so it will lay out future costs.
Yeah.
Look, I have a
They were
hunch.
evaluating systems to replace infrastructure before it fails and better plan for expenditures.
Well, Steve, what would you like to do with the GAC conversation? Should we have a follow-up meeting? Or
Yes, I
executive
think,
session of some kind? I mean, what do you want to do? here?
yes. Yeah, we should do that. Because it's more, this is a lot more detailed. I think, yeah, we can set some up as early as next week. We could possibly do it in person, which would probably be easier.
Well, do you want to do it after the next meeting with Tetra Tech?
Yeah, why don't you do that? When's the next meeting?
The next meeting should be next week.
Wednesday. Yeah, next Wednesday, 10 a.m.
I am on vacation the next week, so I won't be able to attend if it's next week, but I'm back on the 27th. If that's too long, don't wait for me.
It's up to you, but we can always, shoot for Thursday, Friday next week. More like I could do Friday, during the day.
Fred, should we plan on inviting somebody from the company?
I not yet. I think we should have.
I suggest, Steve, we have another conversation as a board to
Okay.
get our position in line here.
Right. I agree. So let's,
And we probably should have the conversation also about the rate study to make sure where our numbers are. As I
So-
said, we can't go and ask either Don or Jason because they are not here.
so we'll do the next one in person. Would that be better for us? So we can,
However you guys are, it depends on where you are.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me. I cannot do next Friday though.
it's the following week. Twice. I can pretty much do I could do the 26th, 27th, 28th. Anytime during the day.
I'm available 28th, 9th, and 30th, if that matters.
Okay, well, you're available the 28th?
Yes.
I could do
Okay,
the
I have a dentist appointment on the 28th at 11 o'clock.
Do you want to do like first thing in the morning?
Hey.
Like I get up at 4 a.m. So
You too?
I have,
I mean-
I have a 10:30 on the 28th. It's gonna run about an hour. I cannot miss. Other than that, I'm available the rest of the day.
How is this? Is this,
Okay,
know,
we
with-
could do first thing in the morning, so we're done for your 10:30, so I can get to my 11 o'clock dentist.
can we do like, is it bad to say it's at like 7:30?
8 o'clock?
Yeah,
Hey,
Yeah, works for me.
hold on, Water Commission. Okay. Brenda, you got that?
Wednesday, 9:28 AM. Is it in person or Zoom?
In person. Want to do it in person, folks? Would that be easier? I think I just wouldn't, might be easier in person.
All right,
Okay.
it's gonna be GAC.
Just GAC executive session.
and what time was it?
8 AM,
8,
8 AM at the plant.
8 AM.
With that, Chris, are you okay going to the plant that early?
Yes, of course.
Okay, me too. Okay, we're gonna have to kind of. I gotta really get a hard stop.
So I'll throw out a couple quick points about Elms Meadow. So I refreshed my memory on the pilot study. Given that it was done by Tetra Tech, it was done over a year ago, and their cost estimate was 400,000 for their recommended solution, the ion exchange. Probably can't put too much weight on that right now, so we should have a discussion on the value we're putting on that pilot study, and what potential options are going forward if it requires further analysis, a second opinion, and then just an overall direction from the board of what we're going to do with Elms Meadow. But likely, if we want to remove PFAS from there, we need an ion exchange system. So obviously that requires a substantial investment in infrastructure, and some other logistical problems that need to be solved, like backwash. And so those are the questions that need to be answered. So I would suggest we just keep this on our plate until we can have some time to focus on it and work towards a solution and getting that infrastructure back online.
Okay,
I
what
agree.
is their suggestion about Elms Meadow? You know, I've been trying for 10 years over that to stop the dumping. Because looking at the numbers that are coming down, even from the drainage coming from the hillside, we have PFAS in that. It is not coming from septic systems because we know there are none there. And it seems as though the only logical place it could be coming from is the dumping and the stuff people are putting on their lawns and trees and everything else. And if we could somehow clean up the Wellfield area, I have talked to Paul Legel. He said he thinks we can get contractors in there to clean some of it up and make it look like it was when he was growing up. I don't know what it was like when you were a little kid, Chris, but you know, talking to the people my age, they keep saying it was a nice field and not a dumping ground like it is now. And that, I don't know if that would solve any of our solutions, but it would be an enhancement to the community and maybe we can get more of the community involved. I put a proposal up before my garden club again the other day. I'm waiting to hear back from them. But this is just something that we may be able to pursue if people think it's worthwhile. Okay, any thing on financials that we want to talk about? Anything about the end of the year yet? Have we heard anything, Brenda?
No. The new finance director does not start until October 3rd. Dawn is not coming in anymore and hasn't been, so I
thought he was supposed to close out the year.
So the year, I believe, is closed out as of today. I think he worked on it this week. So I'm waiting on things on my other budgets as well. So I anticipate we're probably not going to have any substantial discussion about it until the new director is in. And I put her on your first meeting. We can do the introduction and hit the ground running. I have yet to meet her.
Do you know a name?
Jennifer Mullen.
So she used the director in the town of Falmouth, as I understand it. So she's got
She's
municipal.
got 25 years of service, I was told.
Yeah.
Good.
Good experience. All right, so,
I have a
next
hard
thing-
stop. I have to jump off, guys.
Okay.
Anything else?
yep, okay, see you, Fred. I got a
All right,
hard
thank-
stop too. We'll
Yeah,
just
Fred.
do the last one, real quickly, approval of the August 25th meeting minutes.
Yes, I make a motion to approve the August 25th meeting minutes.
I will
Second.
say, yep, all in favor?
I,
Aye.
All right. Any other comments for the commission? Okay, so I'm gonna make a motion to close the water commission meeting for Friday, September 16th at 11:05 a.m. Here a
thank you
second.
very much, everyone.
Have
Okay,
a good weekend.
thank you. You too.
Thank you.
See you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.